Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to another week of the AWE Digital Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ritter, and my colleague, Christian Dominique, who usually joins, will be joining in a few moments from now, but we're from wherever in the world you're watching. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us today. Today, we're asking a question that feels almost impossible in 2026. And that question is, what happens when you actually stop chasing the noise? The theme for today is to define a life that actually listens. And so that's about intuition, logic, reasoning, and trying to understand the signal in the noise. So part of the problem with forming an intuition or a gut feeling nowadays is that algorithms are designed to predict us, but they don't know us intrinsically. So they drown out our intuition. A lot of intuition comes from experiential knowledge. There's a example in a book by Ray Dalio. We can show that on the screen. The book is called Principles, where you're driving on a highway and a car breaks in front of you. And intuition is the subconscious to working in a way so that you start braking immediately and you know when to brake with the car in front of you. So we'll be talking a lot about what intuition really means and about how to consciously design a life that works best for you. Uh, Christian, good,
Hello.
nice for you to join us. How are you doing?
Very good. Designing a
Fantastic.
life that listens. Hope the listeners are listening. Sorry for technical difficulty. We talk a lot about
All
tech.
good.
Sometimes we love it. Sometimes it's difficult, right?
So we were just, I was introducing the podcast for today, the theme, chasing the noise and start consciously designing a life that is best suited for us, right? And a lot of the reason that it's become so difficult to consciously design a life is that we're almost drowned by the noise of what algorithms send our way, the amount of information we're bombarded with on a daily basis. I've used this analogy a lot of times on this podcast, but Adam Ghazali with the distracted mind was the first to propose the model that the brain adapted in a way similar to how our hunter-gatherer ancestors would forage for food. The brain adapted in an information-scarce environment. Information was a valuable source of well, just a valuable way to survive, essentially. And it was like stumbling upon like a bunch of berries, right? Something that's rich and laden with energy. Whenever you find a valuable piece of information in the environment, that's very, the brain prioritizes that. That has become manipulated essentially in today's world with online media, people bombarding us with messages trying to make us feel like it's important. We need the newest product. We need the latest thing. We need it in order to either, keep up with the Joneses or just feel like we are worth something at all. And it's harder to really distinguish what our intuition, what our gut feeling is telling us in this age of technological chaos that's really going on online. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you, Christian, today. I think it's a super relevant one for many people. And yeah, why don't you just share some thoughts on the subject?
Well, I also like the word design, right? So we're not talking about intelligent design or creationism. Just like how can we design something purposefully, right? Design is a purpose, right? Actually, we're talking to some new podcast guests. One is a designer of schools. We're helping schools design a better learning environment, more attention, things that we're talking about. And I think that the important aspect of this discussion is also like planning
Planning is a extremely important
or should
element
you
of
listen before
this
you listen?
discussion. Being intentional, intentionality. And why do you think that's become so difficult for many people today? You know, the intentionality
Because
aspect
they've
of
been
it.
pulled in so many directions. They have a calendar full of stuff of different things. They have so many opportunities, offline and online, and they're probably choosing the easier online ones. And because it takes a little bit more to actually have courage and go out and do things when it's easier to just do what the easy stuff, right? So we want to suggest that um, challenge is important, but before you accept and do any type of challenge, don't do a TikTok challenge. Like, that's boring. But if you do, we'll watch your video and dance with you. But it's more like, what type of challenges that will make you grow and that will make you curious, right? We talked about
Yeah,
curiosity, bringing creativity, and a lot of that also comes from the calm and introspection, right? So
yeah,
how can you listen and not just listening to our resets? So we have a Patreon resets. You can listen, you can be immersed in find awe in other things. But how can you listen to your body? How can you listen to your partner,
yeah,
your coworker, your environment,
yeah.
and your thoughts? But don't listen too much about your thoughts, because sometimes they're pulling you in different directions, right?
I think what I think of when you talk about that is one of the reasons we founded this company is that we wanted to be more than just a self-help uh, company that people turn to, because I think that self-help without action is actually self-harm. Something that I've also mentioned on this podcast, because you can just go in circles of knowledge and reading books without actually doing anything to implement those things in your life, right? To take action. So one of the things we thought of consciously when we started this, that how do we design a system that translates insight into behavioral change directly, rather than just being, a podcast where we talk about how it is to live a better life or give people advice. It's like, how do we give people the tools to actually create lasting change rather than just being another, uh, excuse me for lack of a better term, just self-help porn, essentially, that does nothing to really translate or make a lasting change in somebody's life.
Because you can
So
hear things or read things, but are you implementing it, right? So we're here
exactly.
discussing. Again, we're live on many platforms on our Friday podcast. We will have some more guests this month. Stay tuned. But today we're actually, you know, talking about this subject to give tools, not just having a conversation. It is live,
Mm,
so if you're at any platform, you can ask questions. But we do have
yeah.
I don't think I told you, but we have a special guest today, who is it's called Lumi. It's our AI, right? So I did some research, like but I was a little bit lazy. No, it's not true. I did research for the podcast, but I wanted to also get an outside opinion. Lumi is our ethical AI trained for happiness and wellness, and wanted to see what Lumi had to say about this topic. So I asked the question about designing a life that listens, and we can see what Lumi gave for answer.
Let's take a look.
So Lumi says, designing a life that listens begins with cultivating awareness, the first of the four A's. By turning into both your inner world and the external environment, you can better understand the needs, desires, and feedback it offers. Next, integrate acceptance to acknowledge and embrace the reality of your experiences without judgment. Very important, without
Mm,
judgment. This allows you to adapt and respond more thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Again, I agree with Lumi so far. You can give your thoughts after that, Mark. Foster a habit of deep listening in daily
mm,
interactions. Be present, maintain eye contact, and resist the urge to formulate a response while the other person is speaking. This practice
mm.
of presence, one of the 8 P's, enriches connection and teaches empathy. I would add compassion as well. And lastly, embrace curiosity from the 7 C's to remain open to new perspective and ideas. Curiosity fuels continuous learning and growth, enabling you to design a life that not only listens but evolves based on what it hears. So, what do you think about Lumia's response?
I think Lumi has a beautiful response. And first of all, what is Lumi, right?
So, Lumia
What? Mhm.
is the ethical AI that we created to help people manage their wellness, daily habits,
Mhm.
and to be
Mhm.
happier. So ask Lumi
Mm.
questions like this. How can I design a life
Mm.
that does this? What should I think about in a relationship, in a work
Okay.
environment?
So you just go to AWE's website to try out Lumi,
That's correct.
and it's free.
It's free. You can use it on the web and on WhatsApp, and it
Mhm.
will
What type of people should use Lumi? What sort of use cases?
anyone and their mother.
Anyone and their mother. I think everyone has a mother, and I think everyone's mother should also try it. But that's really interesting. So anybody listening, go check out awedigitalwellness.com. Try Lumi for free. No gimmicks, no asks. See if you know if people are using ChatGPT already as a therapist, use Lumi because it's actually been designed uh, to provide adequate mental health support to actually implement those lasting behavioral changes that we alluded to before. Uh, and rather than just agreeing with everything that you have to say, it's built from a therapeutic foundation to actually, give you advice that doesn't suck.
And it's not a therapist, it is a coach, but it does pretty good answer. I think we both agree on that answer, right? So,
Yeah,
and we've been, of course, testing it and validating its answers and making sure we also have
yeah,
a 97% security rating. And it will tell you to talk to a human as much as possible if you need to. But if you can't talk to me, Mark, or your best friend, because they're ghosting you, talk to Lumi in the meantime. And reach out to us as well. We're real humans. But we created this to help during the gaps,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, so whether it's a relationship difficulty or general life advice or existential worries or just anything that you're dealing with, motivational issues, try out Lumi, see if it actually helps you, support you. You have nothing to lose by just going on the website, trying out for free. Um, Check it out on our website, awdigitalwellness.com.
And Lumi
So I think
is going to be able
it'll be really helpful.
to speak soon, but
So,
is it really able to listen? So let's get back to the listening part, right? So, what do you define as listening? Listening to others, listening to yourself, um, and what's the optimum way that you would describe to the audience to listen properly? Because everyone's listening, but are they really listening?
the optimum way to true listening is about having receptive attention. So you have surface level listening for keywords, waiting for your turn to speak, or reacting to a notification, or just not really listening, but you hear one thing and you just hold on to that thought. Deep listening, I would say, is a state of broad vigilance where you are aware of the context, the subtext, and the silence between words. This is what we also call relational listening. So when we think of a life that listens, listening is the ability to perceive the signal, which is your intuition, the needs of others as well, amidst the noise, right? The digital pings or the ego driven anxieties. And the optimum way to listen is involves both hemispheres of the brain, which provides this open field of awareness. So your right hemisphere uh, is more responsible for open thinking, and the left hemisphere is more for the focus. It's what we also call system one and system two, as Daniel Kahneman had alluded to in his book Thinking Fast and Slow. Um, so you have this open loop method, which is more right hemispheric. And so instead of looking for a specific answer, you hold an open loop. you allow information to enter without immediately categorizing it as useful or useless. And
Can you give an example for the audience? I mean, I left Dynamic Elements work as well. I know System 1, System 2, but that might be, maybe too difficult for some people to understand. Give us like specific example. You know,
so
you're in a mall. What can you use System 1 and System 2 to analyze what's going on?
correct. So I am listening intently to what you're saying right now. This is more focused, system two concerted thinking. I'm very focused on what you have to say. System one is more immediate. Think of if somebody were to walk by and I'm at a cafe right now in the mall and some waiter walks by and the glasses fall off the platter and it crashes and I immediately turn to look at it. It's very fast, reactionary, impulsive sort of thinking, which is more it's less prefrontal cortex and more so amygdala reactionary response, right? Or if ambulance drives by and the loud noise immediately catches your attention, that's more system one. System two, again, is more concerted, effortful thinking, which does cost more cognitive resources, right? That's why we can be very tired at the end of the day after having worked, been in 500 Zoom meetings, and we can't just like, we just don't have the resources anymore because we've used system two all day long.
And again, we want to know that there's a reason why we have those two systems, right? They're both important at different times. Right? If you're only in system two and you're only focused, you might miss that things are going on, right? So, and we need, there's another concept linked to that, which is kind of the um, exploration and exploitation, right? So when you're in system one, you're more exploring, you're open, and that's good as well. You need to be flexible, be maybe creative, be
Mm,
inspired. But sometimes we need to be on system two to be, exploiting. It's not in a bad way, like exploitation, but it's exploiting this moment, this, going deeper and
correct.
finding that deep work, that deep thinking. And both of them are useful, but most people now are still pretty much stuck mostly on system one, right?
So I want to maybe add some more examples that will help people understand. When we talk about listening, right? Most people listen with a closed loop. So that means that they hear a word, the left hemisphere of their brain categorizes it, and they immediately begin formulating a response or a rebuttal, or they're thinking about this one thing rather than actually listening to the rest of what you have to say. So the open loop approach, on the other hand, is like you would listen without trying to solve the other person or try to win a point or add your own part to the story. You notice their tone, their pauses, and even your own internal gut reaction without acting on it, essentially. And so the result of that is you often hear um, what people are saying more so than in a closed loop system. And that's really important for having a more thoughtful conversation with somebody. Algorithms create closed loops by showing you exactly what you already like, trapping you in an echo chamber, essentially. It's more profitable to have to show you content, messages, uh, advertisements that confirm your pre-existing beliefs already. So the result is essentially a lower level of intuition. You intentionally, if you took an open loop approach, for example, you would intentionally consume information that has nothing to do with your brand, your interest, or your niche. You read a physical, for example, you guys, like anybody listening to this, can read a book on a random topic or listen to a podcast from a complete different political opinion. Let's say that you are more left wing liberal and you listen to a right wing podcast, right? You do something that just totally contradicts your pre-existing beliefs, and that will be it will cost you literally more mental resources to do that because it has a more jagged frictioned consumption of information in your mind, right?
Well, we
So
have
mhm,
bias of kind, and another way to think about your example is if you're doing something that is going to cause you to have to switch perspective, then it's going to cost you more, right? It's going to cost you
mhm,
more So it's kind of a cognitive load. You have to think more because you're not used to the situation, right? And one way
Right.
to practice that and to practice resilience is actually, one of the 8 Ps, the
100%.
framework that Lumi knows and that we know at AWE. One of the 8 Ps is playfulness and play, right? So one of the best ways to play is to role play, right? And it can be,
Yep.
in many ways. It can be like comedy, it can be other ways. And any activities, it doesn't have to be full role play or acting. It can be like just being in a position that puts you in a different way. So you have to think and act in a different way. So you're getting
Yes.
your brain used to like switching perspectives, and then you're also building that compassion and empathy, being able to see other people's perspective and listening with a more open and comprehensive mind, right?
100%. I, and I think it does for, for people to switch into what you're describing, it would take, from the default mode of closed loop, it would take internal resources, which is why I think a lot of people resist it in the first place. Um, if we take a step back for a moment, perhaps Alfredo, you can put up on the screen the green book cover, The Master and His Emissary. Uh, exactly. So this is a book by Dr. Ian McGilchrist. It's actually a pretty well-known book, and so he's a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist.
By the way, Mark,
Based.
I really look forward to hear about it because I read a lot of books. I have the book, but I haven't read it
Oh
yet.
my God, he's got it.
I
He's
haven't.
got it as well. Okay,
It's still not annotated with all my notes, but tell me about it.
okay.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So let me tell the audience. This is more for the audience rather than you. So basically, Dr. McGilchrist describes how the two hemispheres of the brain, pay attention to the world in fundamentally different ways. So you have the left hemisphere, which is what he calls the emissary. The emissary is like the servant in like British English. So that's focused on narrow, task-oriented attention. It is the part of the brain that helps us grasp things, literally and metaphorically. So, in a driving context, if you're driving a car, this part of the brain is focused on the mechanics of driving, the destination, and the specific distance to the car ahead of you, right? The right hemisphere, which is the master, is focused on broad, vigilant, and holistic attention. And, it's looking out for the unexpected. That's more system one. So McGilchrist uses an example to show that while the left brain is busy doing the driving, it is the right hemisphere that provides the global vigilance that's required to detect a sudden change in the environment, like a car braking in front of you. The right brain picks up the anomaly first and signals the need for the action before the left brain's focus processing even realizes there's a problem. So you talk about the more subconscious, reactionary parts of the brain. That's the right brain, right? So you have subconscious intuition versus conscious logic. Um, McGilchrist's core argument, however, is that modern Western society has become a slave to the emissary, so the left brain, and that prioritizes narrow efficiency and data over the master, which is the right brain, which provides meaning, context, and the big picture awareness of reality. So digital devices, the way that we use them today, force us into a left hemisphere mode, which is very narrow, fragmented, task-based attention. And they make us lose our right hemisphere ability to listen to the world's broader context and our own intuition. And even when we want to listen to our own intuition, we have what I've seen in a lot of clients that I treat, people have become just less trusting of their own intuition. They don't know if it's right, right? They're less trusting of themselves, which makes them more susceptible to outside influence. So what do you have to say
Well,
about that? I'm
yeah,
really,
thanks for
yeah,
explaining that to the audience, and to me. I think you gave some very, very good points, which I agree. The only thing for some neuroscientists, geeks, we now know that the kind of definition of left and right brain is not exactly 100%. First, there's 90% of people that have some distinction,
yeah,
10% is switch, and then we now see it more as system than completely localized. But it's a good analogy, and it is two different types of systems, and they are slightly localized in that way. In terms of
yeah,
the consequence, which is more important than the geeky neuroscience, the consequences are real. we are more and more seeing things in a narrow, cyclical view, polarized
Correct.
view as well, if we want to think about in those terms. And it is becoming more and more difficult to have this broader perspective, even though in theory we have more information, we have more connection. We could have the broadest perspective in the life. It's easy to travel. I've traveled a lot. You've
Yeah.
traveled as well. It's easy to travel. It's easy to get information. Yet, are we really having a broader perspective in general as a society?
Yeah. Yeah, we're drowning in information, and it's really interesting to discuss what the consequences of that are on our own intuition and reasoning, essentially. So, more information does not equate to a greater freedom of choice. It actually equates in a lot of instances to greater anxiety amongst from the choices that are available. And I think Angela Duckworth also talks about this as well. That again, freedom of choice is not enhanced necessarily by an abundance of choice of options that are available, right? If you have 10 different types of ketchup to choose at the supermarket, it doesn't make you more free essentially to choose. It perhaps will create some sort of anxiety effect about, okay, choosing the right ketchup. Is this the right one? Whereas if there was just one ketchup, it would make life so much easier to just choose rather than have this decision fatigue. Steve Jobs even wore the famous black turtleneck, the thing that I'm wearing right now. He only had a black turtleneck because he wanted to reduce decision fatigue in the morning. He didn't want to have to think about what he actually had to wear. He just wanted to have jeans, black turtleneck every single day.
I should
That would make his life a lot
do the
easier.
same thing. What do you think, Mark? I'll do something like Uberman with the black shirt every time. Yeah,
Yeah, why don't we just wear turtlenecks on this
yeah,
podcast from
we'll
now
do
on?
that.
You wear okay. Uh, uh, but yeah, no. So I mean, essentially, what we're talking about here are subconscious processes and conscious processes. Essentially, you know, the intuition is more subconscious, but still built on experiential knowledge, and logic and reasoning. Those are very conscious, effortful processes. So, if we can for a moment, Alfredo, if you could show the other book cover on the screen, Principles by Ray Dalio. So Ray Dalio, a famous investor, hedge fund manager, he wrote this book, Principles, I think back in 2017, maybe it was even earlier, I believe. But the reason I want to mention this, that I read this book a long time ago, and when I thought of the topic for today, being designing a life consciously, there was a very specific part of this book that immediately came to my mind. And Dahlia talks about, these subconscious and conscious processes, and he tries to distinguish between them by calling them the ego and the blind spots, right? Understanding the two barriers. And he uses a very specific example, of this highway scenario where you're driving on a highway and the car in front of you suddenly slams on its brakes. You instantly step on your own brakes before you've even thought about slam on the brakes. You don't think like, okay, I'm going to slam on the brakes. You just do it, right? Because the car in front of you brakes immediately, and you do it also just in a reactionary way. If you're asked to explain the physics, the exact pressure applied to the pedal, and the timing required to avoid a collision in a way that could be programmed into a computer, you likely couldn't do it, but your subconscious knew how to react through pattern recognition and experience, while your conscious higher level mind was likely thinking about something else entirely, right? And so the goal with the Redalio's goal with that analogy was really to highlight that our intuition, the subconscious, is incredibly fast and often accurate in physical or repetitive tasks, but can also be a source of trouble in complex decision making if it isn't synced with our logical higher level minds, right?
Wow, I
So
love that.
to make great to make great decisions, you have to recognize that much of what you do is driven by subconscious animal instincts. Two, audit those intuitions using logic to ensure they aren't just emotional reactions like fight or flight. And three, train your subconscious by creating principles, hence the title of the book, so that eventually your good logical decisions become as automatic as stepping on the brakes on the highway.
Thanks for that. That's very insightful. And when we talk about logic, I was just studying episteme, so the difference between um, Descartes' rationalism and more of the Bacon's view. So are we looking at the world logically through our mind or through philosophy or through experiment and science, right? Um, the
Hmm.
thing is that both those things presuppose that there is a truth to be found, right? Which is kind of probably not, because it's more dynamic than that. And also, it presupposes that the human brain or being is capable of logic, which perhaps it is. But there's also another great book like Pinker talking about rationality, and we have overextended our um, kindness to ourselves, that thinking that we're rational beings. We are more rational than other beings, but we're still mostly not rational, still acting on impulse, still using limbic system, reactive modes, amygdala. And just to be aware of that, and when we talk about awe, the first part is awareness. Um, how can we increase our awareness? One of them is by listening, right? So, how
Hmm.
can you listen to your thoughts, listen to your body, and then say, "It's okay. Well, yeah, I'm thinking I'm being logical about this. Am I? Right?
Right.
What limiting beliefs that I still have? What cognitive biases do I still have? And just the fact that you know that you have them, this awareness allows to listen deeper, to go deeper, to use system two and not just system one, to
Hmm.
use the masters and not the emissary. And what were the two things that from Dalio? One was the ego, and can you remind me the second one?
So the first one were the blind spots, and the other one was the
Like,
ego. So these are the two barriers. So the ego and the blind spots.
yeah, so the blind spot include cognitive biases, emotional biases, subconscious decision,
Correct.
and the ego we know in neuroscience is
Yeah.
created by the default mode network, and it's we can people understand the word ego, but it's basically
Yeah.
whenever you say me, myself, and I, or my this, my. I always correct people when they say, "Well, my country." It's like it's not your country. Or did you own it, or do you own anything? The
Yeah.
country you were born in and maybe live in, but it's not my country, right? And then because people say it's my country, then you have war and millions of people die.
Yeah.
That's right.
Um, let's think of some practical examples because people are tuning in from LinkedIn, they're tuning in from YouTube, they're tuning in from whatever platform.
Facebook X. Thanks for all the listeners.
Yeah. Thank you to all the listeners. Practical examples of how this plays out in the digital world. Let's say that you're scrolling on Instagram and you see a content creator. Let's say you see Andrew Tate driving his Bugatti, right? And he's smoking a cigar and he's telling you, you're broke and this is why you're broke and like you have to make more money. And this does something, right? It tells you one that you're broke and that you need to do more. But more than that, it's trying to get you to take an action, which is perhaps buy his course, uh, enter his program, right? um, which is the desired outcome of the message. But what that also does to people is it perhaps corrupts their own internal framework, their intuition framework.
Well, I'm not gonna, judge Andrew Tate as a person or whatnot. I'm just saying, as this example, there's also one thing, right? There may be like selling products, but there's also probably the person giving the message also has an issue with what we talked about, the ego, right? So
Yeah.
why was that person wanted to be on a cigar and a Bugatti in the first place, right?
Well, because society is telling them, and I don't want to get too philosophical here, but from the messages that are being amplified online, they're told that to live a good life is to drive a Bugatti and to smoke a cigar. And I think a lot of the economy is predicated on people who are unhappy with their lives. That's why we
Yeah.
can sell them things to make them happier.
Well, we are trying to make people happier, and we don't want people miserable. But yeah, I guess that's not the incentive that the capitalist game is playing in terms of keeping
Yeah.
you mildly unsatisfied so that you always want more. instead of showing you how to be truly sustainably happy and have quasi-permanent peace regardless of the situation. Two different approaches, right?
100%. So I think whether it's Andrew Tate or another, like a lot of people, for example, um, will scroll on LinkedIn and they'll see a post that says like, "Oh, uh, I just I had this experience, totally unrelated to work. I proposed to my wife. I had a car accident, whatever. This is what it taught me about business, right?" Or LinkedIn is becoming the funniest place for this. Like this 18-year-old hustle entrepreneur is like, "Oh, I had a 10-hour flight. Uh, all the other people were relaxing, watching movies while I was hustling and working." It's like, bro, like it's so obvious what you're doing. Like you're so desperate to be seen, like you're hustling hard. But what it also does is like, hey, you should be doing this all the time as well, right? Look how
Yeah,
hard I'm working, and then they need the amount of hustle and work that other right. And I think LinkedIn is like
yeah. I mean, that's
it's a perversion of that hustle culture. Essentially, people
well.
think
I
that
think
like they Mhm.
there's much worse platforms than that. Maybe it's your feed, Mark. What's going on with your feed? No, I'm just joking.
I'm seeing all the hustlers on LinkedIn
I'm
right
seeing all
now.
the happy posts. What's wrong? I
Yeah,
got the happy posts. Yeah,
yeah,
algorithm got you.
yeah,
But yeah, I do believe that any platform or any, it doesn't even have to be online. If your friends are all hustling and like, oh, I'm doing this and I want to get my Bugatti, or I'm working that hard because I don't know the purpose of my life, or it's on and offline, right? It's like, how can you create a life that listens to other people, listens to yourself, and also can be not only logical, but
yeah,
critical, like critical about what's, again, we talked about meaning. Why is it that we're having the crisis of purpose and meaning? And
yeah,
what is God doing to bring you back that purpose to you, your life, your family, your friends, your organization, is to make you pause, right? As we do in our
yeah,
research, corporate resets, individual resets, family resets, is to give you that space to have an awareness and saying, hey, you're going 110 miles per hour or kilometers per hour, depending where you are, towards that wall. But did you stop and figure out, is that the wall that I want to crash into? Or do
yeah.
I want to go to see something else, a beautiful desert, a seaside,
Right.
a camp, or whatever it is?
What's the direct correlation between intentionality, conscious life design, and uh, social media or the internet? Like, why is social media and the internet corrupting that ability to intentionally design life? I know we talked about that last week on the podcast, but it's interesting to really understand what's the exact correlation going on here between the consumption of information online and our ability to consciously design a life that we want, not one that we're trying to mimic from some online influencer.
Well, again, different food have different caloric intake and quality. Different information have different quality as well. Hopefully, if you're listening live or later, this information is good, and not all information on social media is bad, right? And what's good or bad? Is it helpful for you to be a flourishing human being? Is my definition, right? So a lot of content online are not helpful for you to be a flourishing human being because they're there
Yeah,
to steal your attention, right? And that, when they get more and more of your attention and quicker, then you don't have that space for intention and purpose and conversation, right? I love doing this podcast every week. It's an hour, a little bit less, a little bit more, but we're taking time to talk about topics that matter to us and that hopefully matters and resonates to the audience,
yeah,
because we're taking that time. We're taking, a few hours to research, to prepare, because those topics matter. It's not about, oh, who's going to click about, a funny meme only because it's funny, or because it's viral. Like I did that again, that challenge, that TikTok challenge, that dance, that mimic, that like okay, it's a gimmick, right? We get it. It's
Yeah,
a fade, but is it something that's intentional that you want to say in 2 years? I did that dance. That was really useful, right?
100%. Yeah. No, it's think about, at the end of our lives, did we actually do what our intuition desired, or were we trying to fulfill some sort of mimetic desire based on what we had seen online?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think that's a question that people don't ask themselves enough, right? And the answer might,
Right.
might change, right? So it's evolving. It's not, we can have a pretty good idea of a purpose that also can change, and then passions will change even more, right? So passion will be like the fire to drive you somewhere, and the purpose is more like the overall, you know, direction, right? You can go passion left, passion right, but you're going towards the direction of purpose, right? But people don't have that direction. They're looking at their feed, and that's gonna direct their day or the next hour and a half, right? I'm going there, and
Yes,
that machine is gonna direct my next 90 minutes. Okay, it's up to you. And what tools can we give the
absolutely.
listeners to help them, overcome this
Lumi,
difficult challenge?
Lumi,
Lumi is one.
we mentioned it already. Check out Lumi for free on our website. Not so subtle plug, but go on there, try it for free. Lumi can give you a lot of insight into how to live a good life and not always you cave into what you think is the right thing because you saw some post or influencer tell you that this is an important thing. If you're looking for clarity, try out Lumi for free, awedigitalwellness.com.
Last time I was talking to Lumi, it suggested for me to read a book. I'm like, okay, that's good AI. Do you see that on the Instagram post? People ask me to read.
Well, I see like again, it's like the virtue sickness, like, oh, I wake up at 5 a.m. to read the Bible for 30 minutes, and then I go to the gym, and then I pray, and then I go hustle and work on my business because I'm a successful entrepreneur. All that, like, it's more like, hey, look at me reading. I'm better than you, sort of, than people telling me to read. It's like, I read and you don't. So while you're doom scrolling, I'm just reading. Like, come on. It's such,
Like you said, virtue
yeah,
permanent.
such
So,
BS.
by the way, anyone that's live, you can ask us live any question. You can ask Lumi at any time, any question. You
Question
can
time.
ask me and
Feel free to.
the craziest question. We like crazy questions or simple questions, whatever you want. We're here. And you know, what would you say that changes? What's kind of the, like, let's say listeners are listening and want to listen more actively. Yes, that was a pun. Um, can you give them like an idea of what that would look like if they spend the time to pause, be a little bit calmer, less reactive, more actively listening, more curious in their life and their environments,
Mhm.
through themselves and through others? What would change? You think, Mark?
I think people build a lot more confidence and trust in their own intuition rather than feeling just un- unstable and unsure of themselves. And this would be a very physiologically just a very calm feeling in their body.
Calm, grounded, hopeful,
Yeah.
capable, right? That's why I love also our resets. Like everyone that have given us feedback are
Hmm.
feeling calm and peaceful, which is something that Thanks
Hmm.
for participating in creating this with us, Mark. Reset on Patreon. Also,
Absolutely.
please check it out. Also available through our website to learn more about it.
Yep.
Um, and as we do in the resets, and let's practice together as an audience, even if you're busy. Let's take like a few deep breaths and just listen to our body, to the exterior, and let's try it for like 10 seconds, right? This is active listening.
Yeah,
Aware, active listening.
active listening. And with that, Christian dropped off. But I think the point of the exercise is still extremely important. That I was just saying with that, you dropped off your message and then you were out.
Go out with a bang. So that was almost it, but I'm back.
Goodbye. Listen actively. Goodbye. Yeah. No, I think it's super important message, and I think people should remind themselves any time of the day, is this sort of thinking, is it taking me to the next step? And really holding your thoughts, being critical of your own thinking is a very useful skill to have as well in today's day and age.
Thanks, Mark. And accepting others without judgment, right? Other suggestions, other sometimes you can see it as criticism, right? But people have
Mm,
their own perspective, their own ideas and,
100%.
and reality, right? So if you meet that comment with compassion and care, and you listen with curiosity, I'm sure you're going to be a bit
Yeah.
less agitated, less angry, less reactive, and you'll have a better
Oh, yeah.
outcome for both of the people involved, right? Other things for active listening, tricks, especially in relationships. So that could be love relationship, family. We help parents and children. A lot of teenagers and parents are not having good active listening skills. A lot of couples and also some coworkers, right? We help organizations as well. So a few things that I can add to the discussion about active listening. First, you know, we talked about taking the time, being concentrated on what the person is saying, not only the words, but the nonverbal cues, right? The tone, the speed, if they're there, their body language, and perhaps to make sure that they understand that you're listening. You can give cues that you're nodding, that you're listening. You can say a word that they say and repeat
Hmm.
back, right? You don't have to laugh at their jokes if they're not good, right? I know my jokes are not that good, but just be there, right? And then when you get a little bit more good at active listening, what's very good to do is to kind of, especially the important point, you can say, oh, that point's important. And then next level is to make sure I understood, I'm going to repeat to you what you said, the most important part, and rephrase it and say it in my own word and say, is that what you were saying, Mark? Right? And this is kind of active listening and then showing that you're actively
Yeah.
listening and then creating this kind of better dialogue with two people. And then you can do that with yourself. You can say, did I really understand what I'm thinking about, Christian? No, you don't do that. But yeah.
Well, as a therapist, it's like one of the most essential skills to have is that when somebody talks to you, you have to repeat what they said in your words and ask them if that's correct. And they will oftentimes correct you and say like, yeah, missed out a few parts. Also, very important in sales. If you work in sales, you have to be a very active listener and understand what the client is telling to you or what the prospect is saying and repeat that back to them. And they will the likelihood that they will buy is predicated upon often how listened to they feel in that whole entire interaction.
Great thoughts for all types of people. I think that we've covered a lot of topics. Any other resources, research, or ideas that you have to share?
I was going to share one other study, but it just kind of confirmed it's very similar to what we've spoken about before. Afraid if you want to bring up the screenshot, more about intuition, insight, and the right hemisphere. Basically, what McGilchrist was saying, but it is from 2010, so maybe it's a little bit outdated. But it was talking about where that idea of the gut feeling really comes from, and the different hemispheres of the brain emerging, or influencing our ability to have this intuition and to think rationally. But all it really comes down to is left and I mean it's system one, system two sort of
Well,
thinking.
what I gut feelings. Yes, there's more updates since 2010, but what I really like about this abstract is the part that says associated with movement beyond existing paradigms, right? So that's the hard part. That's the system two. And guess what? Awe, the emotion, the feeling of awe that we try to create in our resets and in our lives
Hmm.
helps you move beyond those existing paradigms. So bring more awe in your life
Yeah,
and you will go further.
100%, 100%. So my last notes, I guess, for today, if people are feeling confused, if they're lacking clarity about their lives, there's a few things you can do. But be very conscious about which decision you make. One, if you are lacking clarity and somebody promises clarity to you, just sort of question critically what their incentive is behind it. If there's a YouTube video, for example, saying like how to gain absolute clarity in your life, just keep in mind that you're adding to information consumption processes of your brain, which is going to keep you perhaps in a loop of seeking more and more information, which is not likely to give you clarity, because a lot of clarity and certainty actually comes from taking actions, like tangible actions in your life, not thinking necessarily, or not trying to get more information. It's reading a book, then going out in the world and testing the theory that you learned from the book, rather than just reading the book in isolation and being like, huh, very interesting theory, and not doing anything about it. So I rather see people read one book a year and actually try the stuff out from that book if it's a self-help book, rather than virtue signaling saying, look, I read 300 books this year. And it's like, okay, well, what did you actually implement in your life from it? Right. So try just reading one book and really living out that advice that's written in that book.
That's
So do that. Two, the second thing, um, it is 2026. There's a lot of AI models out there. A lot of them can be good, a lot of them not so good. It's again not so subtle plug, but we designed an AI model called Lumi for the intention of actually acting as a coach for people who perhaps are they have the knowledge, but there's a gap between knowledge and implementation, and they're looking for that extra push, the extra mile to get them across. So go on our website, try Lumi for free. It's on there, and use it and take advantage of it if you can.
and
Um, if not,
comments if it doesn't
yeah,
serve your purpose. If it, just let us know. We're here to improve. We've tested it with almost
yes,
200 users now. Everyone's loving it. I'm using it.
yeah,
It's gonna maybe appear sometimes in our podcast now if
yeah.
it's still relevant.
It's not like we just pulled it out of the sky. Like, no, a lot of work went into building it. We used actual declassified therapy transcripts, like real sessions with real therapists, with real people to actually build this model, not something that we just like thought like, oh, here's another like AI model. Just help. No, it's like real life problems and solutions that people deal with went into building this. And you'll notice, a lot of times when we are depressed or distressed, we have a tendency to think ourselves, we're so unique with this problem. But actually, there's 8 billion people on this planet. It's very likely that what you're experiencing is not so unique. It's been felt by somebody else. And the good thing about that is that you're not alone. And the second good thing is that, like, if somebody else has dealt with it and perhaps found a solution, maybe you can rely on, like, hey, what did they do to get out of that situation that's very similar to mine? That's why we built Lumi, to actually take what the insights of other people and to help share that information and knowledge in a way that's actually transformational for people. That's going to get them to make lasting changes in their life.
Thanks, Mark. And again, we talked about books and we've read books. And yesterday I was with Ivana and AK in Denmark, recording a podcast that will air in March. And we were talking about their book and my books that will also contribute to Oz knowledge base and legacy. So I've written 2 books that are going to be published in the next few months. If you're going to read 1 or 2 books, like Mark said, might as well be mine. It's called beyond happy, and 4 aces to
There you
happiness.
go.
And we'll have pre-orders on the website soon. In the meantime, you can just email info@awe digitalwellness.com. So thanks everyone for watching. Hope that the content is interesting and worth your time and your ears listening. If you're on the audio version, we're also going to be on Spotify and Apple, as you know. Environmental design for attention is what we're going to be talking to next week, Friday, February 13th. And chime in, reach out to us on our socials, on the website, and please go and see Lumi. Let us know, or let Lumi know what you think.
It's free, guys. Nothing to lose, anything to gain.
Thanks, Mark, as always. I was happy to actively listen to you today.
Likewise.
And see you next week.
See you guys. Bye, everyone.